She didn't know his name. He didn't know hers. But everything began at that moment, under the scorched sky of a Houston summer, with the stench of gasoline and fear still lingering in the air. The sun had barely risen, yet the streets were already alive with sweat and noise. She moved slowly, deliberately, her feet swollen, her back aching, plastic bags cutting into her palms. She was 9 months pregnant, with nowhere to sleep that night. The shelter had been full. Again. So she walked. The intersection came into view, 4 lanes wide, shimmering with heat and exhaust. She waited for the light, one hand on her belly, the other gripping both bags as if they were anchors. Then she stepped forward. The screech of brakes cut through the morning. A flash of black. A body thrown forward. And a man, unconscious, bloody, landed on the asphalt at her feet. For a moment, she stood frozen. Then instinct shoved fear aside. She dropped to her knees, pressed her ear to his chest, then her hand. No breath. No heartbeat. Cars swerved around them. Horns screamed. But she didn't move. Someone shouted. Tires squealed. She looked up and shouted back. A woman ran toward her, phone to her ear, already calling 911. Then more voices. Someone took over chest compressions. A siren. She stood, backing away slowly. No one asked her name. No one looked her in the eye. She was invisible again. She turned and disappeared into the crowd. That night, she found a space behind the old post office. A narrow patch of concrete between 2 dumpsters, shielded from the street. She laid out the thin blanket she'd been given at the bus station. Her water bottle was half empty. Her breath was shallow. Her back screamed. The baby kicked. She whispered a promise through clenched teeth. Just a little longer. Hold on. Morning came, hot and cruel. She walked again. Nowhere in particular. Her body was heavy. Her steps, robotic. But no one stopped her. Not when she collapsed near a bench. Not when she cried into her sleeve. Not even when she begged for help under her breath. 3 days later, the contractions came. Too fast. Too close. She barely made it to the door of a women's shelter before her knees buckled. A volunteer caught her mid-fall. Hours later, her son was born. Small. Quiet. Alive. She named him Elijah. And when they asked for the father's name, she left the line blank. 9 months passed. Quiet, invisible months filled with bottle feeds, second-hand cribs, whispered lullabies, and fear. She stayed at the shelter, cleaned kitchens, folded towels, and tried to fade into the background. Still, sometimes, she felt watched. A car, sleek, black, silent, would park across the street. Same one, again and again. Never for long. No one got out. But it was always there. And then, one morning, the head administrator handed her a small envelope. No stamp. No name. Just her. Inside, a photo. Grainy. From that morning. The man on the ground. Her hands on his chest. Her eyes wide with panic. And one sentence, typed in clean, neat letters. We know it was you. She had barely slept that night. The photo she found beneath her pillow seemed to breathe on its own, radiating a weight she couldn't ignore. The words printed beneath it, "We know it was you," refused to leave her mind. They weren't a threat, but they weren't innocent either. They left something hanging in the air, heavier than any accusation. Recognition. At breakfast, she sat near the wall, where the light didn't reach fully. Elijah was wrapped against her chest, warm and quiet. She barely touched the food on her tray. Her eyes swept the room, cataloging every glance, every shift in tone or posture. But no one looked twice. No one acted like anything was wrong. That frightened her even more. The envelope was now buried at the bottom of the diaper bag, as if hiding it could reverse what it meant. But the image burned behind her eyelids. She kept moving. Routine was her protection. She folded towels, scrubbed tiles, cleared dishes. The work made her forget. until she saw the car again. The same shape. The same deep black that absorbed sunlight instead of reflecting it. It waited across the street with its engine humming softly, almost respectfully. This time, the window slid down. Her hands froze on the mop handle. For a moment, the courtyard seemed too quiet. A man sat behind the glass. His face was calm, not familiar, yet not foreign. His gaze met hers through the air and distance, not urgent, not predatory, just present. She blinked once. The window closed. The car turned. It was gone. That night, she pushed the crib closer to her mattress. Elijah stirred once and settled against the blanket. She double-checked the door lock. Then again. Her heartbeat refused to steady. Her thoughts circled the same loop. The crash, the heat, the sirens, the faceless man. She had kept that moment buried, like a root beneath cement. Now it pushed through the cracks. Someone knocked. Just once. It was Maria, from the night shift, holding a folded sheet of thick paper. Her face was casual. She said it had no return address, no envelope. Just her name, printed neatly across the top. Inside was only one line. "We are not here to hurt you. We owe you everything. Please wait." The handwriting was even, steady, as if written slowly, deliberately. There was no signature. She didn't sleep. By morning, the shadows under her eyes had deepened. Her legs felt heavier, but she moved, as always. She fed Elijah, helped in the kitchen, folded bedsheets that weren't hers. She told no one about the note. In the afternoon, the administrator asked to see her. The office was windowless and cold, and the metal desk between them felt more like a boundary than furniture. The older woman kept her tone light, but her fingers tapped nervously against a folder. A man had come the day before. He hadn't given a name. He had asked about a woman who had helped someone 9 months ago. He left no contact, but had given a donation, large enough to raise questions. Alongside it, he had left a small box. She opened it in silence. Inside was a gold locket, slightly worn. When she unlatched it, it clicked softly. On one side, a photo of Elijah, taken just days ago. On the other, her own face. The angle was unmistakable. That moment in the intersection, caught mid-motion, panic clear in her eyes. That photograph had never been shared. No one else had seen it. But here it was, handled gently, treasured by someone she didn't know. Her chest tightened. That evening, the same car returned. But this time it didn't leave. It waited, silently, just outside the gate, as if time had nothing more urgent to offer. He remembered nothing of the crash itself. No flash of impact, no screeching brakes, no scream. Just fragments. A pulse of pain in his chest. A flicker of light above him. The scent of burnt rubber mixed with blood. And then nothing. Blankness stretched for days, maybe weeks. They told him he was lucky to be alive, that his injuries could have been worse. A fractured skull, 3 broken ribs, a concussion that left his memories scrambled. He listened, nodded, accepted their truth. But when he looked into the mirror, he didn't recognize the man staring back. The eyes were his, but the weight behind them wasn't. In the sterile quiet of the hospital, he learned to move again. Eat, speak, sign his name. He sat through meetings with lawyers, investors, assistants, all trying to hand his life back to him. A company board, property portfolios, stock options. None of it felt real. None of it mattered. What haunted him was the silence just before the crash. And something else. Her hands. He didn't know her name. Couldn't recall her face clearly. But he remembered the pressure of her palms against his chest. The sharp intake of her breath as she hovered over him. She had been the first thing he felt when the world returned, if only for seconds. Weeks later, as his strength returned, so did flashes of that morning. Not the crash, but what came after. Her shape kneeling beside him, the curve of her shoulders, the focus in her expression. She hadn't panicked. She had acted. He asked his staff to pull surveillance footage from the area. Nothing official remained. But a nearby security camera had captured a few frames. Distant, low resolution, but unmistakable. Her silhouette bending over his body. Another frame showed her turning toward a stranger with outstretched hands, mouth open mid-scream. She had been there. And then she had vanished. He enlarged the images, printed them, studied them every morning. It became a ritual. Not obsession. Something quieter. Something deeper. He hired an investigator. Quietly. No press. No digital trails. Just questions whispered through networks that dealt in secrets. Homeless shelters. Free clinics. Social workers. No one remembered her. Or claimed to. Months passed. Then a lead surfaced. A shelter in Houston. A woman matching the image. A newborn child, born shortly after the accident. The timeline fit. The location. The silence. He didn't hesitate. He flew across the country that night. Sat in the back seat of a tinted sedan, watching the rain streak down the window. His heart had settled into a strange rhythm. Not nervousness, but something older. Like waiting for a tide to come in. He didn't knock on the shelter's door. Not right away. Instead, he watched. She moved differently now. Slower. More deliberate. She carried the child against her shoulder as if the world had already tried to take him once. Her eyes were the same, though. Fierce, tired, aware of everything. He returned the next evening, and the one after that. Always from a distance. Always silent. He left gifts anonymously. A box of formula. A new stroller. Donations in cash without explanation. He didn't want gratitude. He just wanted to be near, to confirm what he already knew. When she received the locket, he waited. Expected a response. A signal. Anything. None came. So on the third day, he stepped out of the car. The shelter's receptionist looked surprised but polite. He asked for nothing. Left his name out. Just said he was looking for someone who had helped a stranger once. That was all. Then, across the hallway, she appeared. The child in her arms shifted. She looked up. And time, once again, stopped moving. She hadn't expected to see him again. Not in daylight. Not standing in the center of the shelter's hallway with the fluorescent lights casting strange shadows across his face. She paused mid-step, the child cradled against her chest, shifting slightly. For a breathless moment, she couldn't move. He didn't approach. He didn't speak. But his presence filled the space, drawing the air tighter around her. Her heartbeat thudded louder than the noise of the nearby reception desk, louder than the memory trying to rise inside her. The moment he hit the pavement, the rush of panic, the blood on her fingers. She turned away before her knees gave out. The shelter's hallway narrowed behind her as she walked quickly back to her room. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She simply closed the door and pressed her back against it, holding Elijah closer. The baby stirred, unaware. Safe, for now. For the rest of the day, she didn't leave the room. She watched through the window as the man remained on the bench near the entrance, unmoving, almost statue-like in posture. He didn't leave. He didn't knock. He simply waited, as if time meant nothing to him. As if he owed something that couldn't be measured in days or apologies. That evening, he disappeared. In his place, the front desk staff found a folder, left neatly with her name handwritten on the tab. Inside were documents, deeds, transfer forms, a property listed under her name, a modest house with a small yard and 2 bedrooms. It wasn't extravagant, but it was real, and it was hers. No conditions, no strings, no requests. She didn't understand why it scared her more than if he had asked for something. The last time she was promised anything, it ended with her alone and pregnant, sleeping behind a bus station dumpster. Promises had always meant danger. But this felt like something else. She wasn't sure what. She stayed awake, rereading the documents. Every detail seemed legitimate. Every page marked and signed with clinical precision. No errors, no gaps, nothing shady. Then she found the note, tucked between the final pages. The handwriting was unfamiliar but careful. It said only that the house was already hers, that no one would take it away, that she and her child deserved a safe place, that she didn't owe anything in return. She closed the folder slowly and left it on the nightstand, unopened for 2 more days. He returned on the 3rd. Again, he didn't ask to see her. Again, he said nothing to the staff. Again, he waited, sitting on the same bench as if it were the only place in the world that mattered. The staff began to wonder. The whispers grew louder. Some thought he was her brother. Others guessed social worker. But no one asked directly. She watched from behind the curtain on the 2nd floor. The distance felt safer than confrontation. But something shifted. Slowly. The way he waited without pressing. The way he acknowledged the security guard and spoke politely to the volunteers. The way he held himself. Not like someone trying to impress or manipulate, but someone trying to prove something deeper. She walked past him once, pretending not to see him. Then again, slower. Then, one evening, she sat on the far end of the bench after everyone had gone inside. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them filled with the noise of passing cars, rustling leaves, and 1,000 unspoken thoughts. She returned the next evening, a little closer. Each time he offered no questions. No expectations. Eventually she told him her name. Not aloud, not directly, but through the volunteer who brought him a slip of paper. She began to remember the exact pressure of his chest beneath her palms, the smell of smoke and sweat, the feel of pavement under her knees, and the fear, the overwhelming fear that he would die, and she would be the only one who ever knew. Now he sat before her, healed, real. She hadn't believed in second chances. Not for her. Not after what she'd survived. Until he placed a sealed envelope into the staff's hands and left without a word. That night, she opened it. Inside, a printed document. An update to his estate. A line adding her son's name to a trust. No signature required. Just her consent. But on the last page, almost hidden behind the formalities, there was a scanned image. An ultrasound. Not hers. Not Elijah's. Someone else's child. And a date. 2 years ago. The ultrasound image wouldn't leave her mind. It had been tucked behind trust paperwork, nearly hidden. The date printed along the bottom confirmed it was from years before Elijah was born. The name on the form wasn't hers. But the child it depicted had once grown inside someone. Someone connected to the man who now sat quietly outside the shelter each evening. She placed the envelope in the drawer beside her bed and tried to sleep, but her thoughts twisted into knots. There was another child, another woman, another story she hadn't been told. And suddenly, the ground beneath her feet felt unstable again. The next morning brought whispers. The staff had seen a new face. A woman in a tailored suit speaking with one of the senior volunteers, her tone sharp but measured. She left nothing behind but a business card with a law firm's name printed in silver letters. No message, no request. Later that day, photos began surfacing online. She didn't know how they had been taken or who had shared them, but there they were. Images of her walking toward the shelter, Elijah in her arms, the black car idling in the background. The captions speculated. The headlines guessed. They didn't use her name, but the implication was clear. A billionaire's secret. A mystery woman. A child. She felt the walls tightening again. Volunteers asked questions delicately. Was everything okay? Did she need help? Some looked at her with curiosity. Others, with suspicion. The administrator pulled her aside. There were concerns, she said. Safety protocols. Shelter reputation. They would need to evaluate the situation. By evening, the shelter's atmosphere had shifted completely. She wasn't just a resident anymore. She had become a disruption. The man didn't show up that night. The next morning, 3 individuals arrived at the gate. 2 men, 1 woman, all dressed in neutral colors and clipped professionalism. They didn't identify themselves fully. But their intentions were unmistakable. They asked for a conversation. They referenced the child. They spoke of family interest and paternity verification. The words were smooth, but the threat behind them was jagged and real. She refused to meet with them, refused to hand over anything. But they didn't seem surprised. One of them left a sealed envelope on the desk. No explanation, no request, just the silent weight of legal intimidation. Inside, a demand, DNA testing, no signature, just letterhead. Cold, clinical, precise. She sat on her bed holding Elijah, listening to his quiet breath against her chest. Everything felt fragile again. The illusion of safety, gone. The house offer, the trust documents, the silence and patience. All of it now seemed like a trap laid carefully, one step at a time. She didn't know who to trust, or what this man truly wanted. Was the gift a gesture of gratitude, or a move in a game she didn't understand? When she stepped outside the next day, the bench was empty. No car. No quiet presence. Just wind and dust and the low hum of traffic. A volunteer handed her another envelope that had been dropped off an hour earlier. Inside, a new document. This one bore 2 lines. The first, a certified DNA test confirming 99.9% probability of paternity. The second, a handwritten note in the corner. 1 sentence. No flourish. No pressure. This isn't a request. It's a beginning. She hadn't stopped moving in days. Even in stillness, her thoughts refused to settle. The DNA test had spoken in definitive language, but it wasn't the numbers that echoed in her chest. It was the quiet clarity of the gesture. He had said nothing, but made everything known. Around her, the shelter began to tighten. The silence of the staff turned brittle. Polite conversation grew thinner, laced with restraint. People no longer met her eyes the same way. A few whispered when she passed. Others simply avoided her altogether, as if she carried something volatile. Gratitude and scandal had started to blur. She wasn't afraid, but she was alert. That old instinct, the one honed on cold sidewalks and locked doors, had returned. Not panic, just readiness. She kept her things packed, even when she unpacked them, slept in short stretches, fed Elijah with a watchful eye. The black car had not returned in 3 days, and though part of her wanted peace in the absence, another part understood. The quiet before a shift is often the loudest thing of all. And then, just after dusk, he returned. There was no noise to mark his arrival. No sound of tires or slammed doors. But she felt him before she saw him. The way the air seemed to settle differently, as if the moment itself had grown heavier. He entered the shelter's courtyard not with urgency, but with a strange kind of reverence. He wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, dressed in neutral tones, carrying a leather case. Behind her, an assistant followed, discreet and composed. They approached the front desk without ceremony. Paperwork was handed over. Names were cross-referenced. Signatures were placed where they needed to be. It was quiet, professional, clean. Later, one of the staff members placed a folder into her hands. Inside were final documents, a transfer of property, a notarized trust. Legal verification of her son's security. Assets irrevocably committed in his name. There were no conditions, no fine print, no time limits. Everything had already been filed. She read the pages slowly, carefully. Not because she didn't believe them, but because some part of her needed time to catch up with the reality they described. Another envelope rested beneath the documents. Smaller, handwritten. It contained a letter, brief, deliberate, and deeply human. Not a confession, not a request, not an apology. Just an acknowledgement of who she was, what she had done, and how he had watched her carry more than anyone should have to, and never once collapse under it. She folded the letter, placed it on the dresser, and sat beside the window. Elijah slept near her feet, wrapped in a soft blanket someone had donated just weeks ago. His breath was slow, peaceful. Later that night, she left the shelter for the final time. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. The staff, perhaps, already knew. The keys fit easily in the lock of the house she now owned. The door creaked slightly, and the smell of fresh paint greeted her like a whisper. The light switches worked. The refrigerator hummed gently. The crib had been set up with care. There was food in the pantry, clean towels folded in a linen closet, a washer and dryer stacked near the hallway. She opened and closed doors not to inspect, but to believe. On the counter, she found a single page folded neatly beside a silver pen. It was a marriage certificate. Unfiled, unsigned, empty lines. No pressure, just her name and space. Outside, the evening air was still. The neighborhood was quiet, unfamiliar but safe. She stood on the porch and looked out over the street. She didn't know what she would do next. But she knew what she wouldn't do. She wouldn't disappear. Not anymore. Not